Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ideas Factory. I'm Naghma. Joining me on this episode of the Ideas Factory is Professor Pant. We are witnessing a new Cold War around the world, and this is the tech Cold War. We've been talking of China tech and US tech, but now it looks like this division is getting more and more intensified, and countries are bound to choose between the US tech and China tech. And we've seen that this trade war has resulted in the closing down of consulates. The Chinese consulate in Houston was closed down, and as a result, there was reaction in China, and in Chengdu, the US consulate also closed down. And the concerns in America was that of spying. So this has been a primary concern against the Huawei and 5G technology that China is trying to roll out world over. Along with that, the American elections are revolving around China. China seems to be a big talking point there. So whatever the outcome of the American elections will be, will it change US's policies towards China? Will it alter the course of the trade war too? Along with this, we will also look at the relations between India and the US. Are we getting closer? We have done joint naval exercises. How is US really looking at India vis-a-vis China? All of that in this episode of the Ideas Factory. Harsh, welcome to you. And I would like to start by what happened in the US and as a result in China. In Houston, the Chinese consulate closed down. There were concerns of spying, and the Chinese have always denied it. But as a result, what we saw in Chengdu, the US consulate was also closed down. Now, this trade war, the so-called trade war, is probably tipping over to a new Cold War. How do you look at this? Europe is also, in a way, forced to take sides because America has been asking its allies to prevent Huawei technology in their countries.
I think something very fundamental is happening in the American body politic, in the American intellectual space, in the American policy-making space, and how they think about China. And I think even more important than the closing down of Houston Embassy for me was a very major speech this week that Mike Pompeo gave at the Nixon Library. But basically, he was speaking in such sweeping terms about this relationship that was so reminiscent of the Cold War, parallels that can be drawn now from the past. And it sort of, the way he framed it, that the people of China and the world community should be forcing the Communist Party of China to change track. Otherwise, we are in for trouble. The Chinese Communist Party has decided to take the world in a certain direction, which is against the freedom and liberty that a large part of the world believes in, and therefore they need to be stopped. He talked of alliance for democracies. He talked of like-minded countries. And I think it was a very, very sweeping, enunciation of what has happened in America over the last few months. We have been used to looking at it primarily, we assumed when it began that it is a narrow issue of trade and then technology, then perhaps Mr. Trump's own domestic vulnerabilities. But there is something more fundamental going on. And if you look at the Joe Biden's platform, that is also not very, it might be some shifts here and there that you can witness, but largely the rhetoric is very, very sharp from both the camps. So what I think has happened is a certain consensus has emerged in America that they need to change, that America needs to evolve in a certain direction. Its policy needs to evolve in a certain direction vis-a-vis China. And that while, of course, electioneering is playing its part, Mr. Trump's, the need for Mr. Trump to stand up as a strong man against a rising China is something that will go down well with his voters. But my sense is that there is going to be some lasting legacy, whether or not Mr. Trump remains in office or not. And I think that will have consequences, as you pointed out, for other nations, for American allies, for American partners. But I think what we are now witnessing is a fundamental reevaluation of American policy towards China. And of course, China is also cognizant of this fact, and therefore there are tit for tat reactions that have now become common. You have Houston closing, embassy in Houston being closed, and Chengdu being closed, of American embassy in Chengdu is being closed. So clearly, the both sides are taking it in their stride. Both sides are ramping up the rhetoric as well as their policy options. And I think the critical issue in this episode of Houston embassy is the fact that there is, the whatever information we have got suggests that espionage was a very important part of what, and the idea that a lot of espionage was happening, industrial espionage, technical espionage was happening from Houston embassy, tells you how drastically this relationship has changed. And it, and one was listening to Mr. Pompeo, you could not have, one could look at the irony that it was at the Nixon Library that he was saying these things. It was President Nixon who opened China to Americans and to the wider world, and now we are almost reevaluating, the whole edifice that he created, he and Henry Kissinger created, and now perhaps the Americans are recognizing some of the constraints and some of the costs that their system has to bear because of that. But I think largely this is going to be a long drawn affair. My sense is it will last beyond elections. Whoever comes to office in January 2021 will have to take this relationship, which would have been fundamentally altered by Mr. Trump's first administration. Mr. Trump's administration, which may be the first one, depending on the outcome of the elections.
All right, but like you said, this trade war precedes Mr. Trump, and probably there is some kind of unanimity as far as America's policy towards China is concerned now, especially after the coronavirus pandemic, and as far as the Huawei is concerned, because like you said, the charges over espionage which the Chinese have denied. But then we can see one of the effects in the way the decisions were taken by the Trump administration that the American technologies will not be using the 5G equipment by Huawei.
Yes, the technology issue is so important because on the the basis of this the technological revolution that is happening, the countries are laying the foundations for the next stage of their economic development. And so it is not merely about 5G; it is about the larger foundations of your future economic prosperity. And therefore, for countries, whether it is America, where there have always been concerns about Huawei and about the Chinese companies in 5G, that issue has always lingered, or whether it is United Kingdom that first decided to go with Huawei and then changed its mind in a few weeks before. There has been a clear shift and change in trajectory. Even those countries who are more sympathetic, like France, for example, they have not yet completely denied Chinese entry into their 5G networks, but they are reevaluating it. They are putting down specific guidelines as to how will they go about doing that. Yeah. Similarly, you see in India. Of course, India is a very different context what we are facing with the Chinese on the border. But clearly, the debate has been, even before this border crisis, the debate was very, very sharp in India, whether Chinese should be allowed in certain strategic technologies. And one of the things that this government and Prime Minister Modi said, especially after Corona crisis, the idea that self-reliance is important, that reliance on over-dependence on China is not a very good idea. It's something that I think countries are now really operationalizing in their day-to-day policies. And that is, I think, going to be a big factor in most countries evaluating their options. Most countries looking at Huawei, looking at ZTE, looking at their future configuration of 5G networks, and assessing how and how far can they actually go in engaging China, in engaging Chinese companies, and in using China for their benefit. And I think America has just started that debate, but America has taken it to a very sharp level because of the kind of, for them, the real possibility here is that China can really dethrone them from their primacy in the international system.
Absolutely. So we've seen that Britain has announced ban on equipment for Huawei from the country's high-speed wireless network. We've seen that Germany is in a dilemma what to do because there is China, and it's a big trading partner for Germany, China, and similarly with European Union too. They're big trading partners. Italy, has got new security protocols for Huawei as well as ZTE. But now let's look at the India and the US relationship. The US administration has always seen India as a geopolitical counterbalance to China. And we've had statements from Secretary Pompeo too, saying that China took incredibly aggressive actions, whereas India really has done their best to respond to them in the ways that India responded. And there also seems to be a consensus amongst the members from across the parties, among the members of the Congress from across the parties, about Chinese assertiveness in, as far as India is concerned, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Australia. So there seems to be a consensus there, and we see favorable statements coming out from the United States for India.
Yes, I think we have seen incredible degree of convergence on this issue. And I think the fact that India's crisis with China is not a standalone crisis, it is a crisis that is happening when China is really, really troubling most of its neighbors. And there are multiple crises brewing on Chinese frontiers. So clearly that has helped India's cause, because that has given the world something which perhaps in the context of Sino-Indian relations, the world had not seen before. When India used to say in the past, it used to be seen, oh, well, you look at China has resolved most of its border problem, but it was as if India was the culprit. Now, suddenly, when you're looking at Indian problem in the context of what China is doing everywhere else, you get a different picture, you get a different set of assessment. And in particular for America, I think that the fact that they are looking at a long-term drawn out struggle with China, which means that what previous administrations had talked about, India's centrality to their Indo-Pacific strategy, India's centrality to how America shapes up its relationships in the wider Indo-Pacific, that has become more real. That has become, that is something that they now have to do in real time. And so the urgency to that has become very, very significant. And so Mr. Pompeo has been, has made some remarkable statements in this regard, as you were pointing out, both from highlighting, almost saying that how China is at fault, taking a position very, very categorically, to arguing that India needs to be incorporated in the American, engagement in the region, so that a broader, more cohesive, a more forceful, robust, posturing can be done vis-a-vis China. And as you were pointing out, other countries have supported it. So whether it is Japan, whether it is Australia, Vietnam, even Philippines, for example, you have an array of countries that have now looked at China. They have tried to deal with China differently. It has not worked out. So have taken a step back and are reevaluating. So India, therefore, figures very, very importantly, very, very, interestingly, because I think sometimes, India's positions have been very strong vis-a-vis China over the last 5 to 6 years, even at the risk of being isolated. So whether you look at BRI, whether you look at Doklam, at times it looked as if India was the only country standing up to China. And now suddenly you have the realization that for other countries also enough is enough, and they need to look at India's positioning and they need to learn from it. So I think it has been both ways. India has to involve these countries, but these countries have also recognized that without India, the balancing against China may not work at all.
Yeah, so there is an increasing pushback that we see now from many countries against China. And we've just conducted, India and US has just conducted a joint naval exercise in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Andaman and Nicobar, but we also saw simultaneous exercise in the Philippine Sea between Australia, Japan, and US. When we look at this joint exercise between India and the US, the US nuclear-powered warship Nimitz, what does it signify as far as India's international clout is concerned? Because there was a time in 2007 when the Nimitz docked around Chennai, then there were protests from the environmental groups, of course, but also political groups. But now you see that we successfully conducted an exercise, and it also shows a different political environment here. So what does it tell us about the domestic political outlook and India's international clout?
Well, I think on both fronts, globally as well as domestically, there has been a remarkable transformation as far as China is concerned. And I think one can thank Mr. Xi Jinping for allowing that possibility to happen. There were many groups in the past in India that have taken the position that engagement with China is important, that we need to continue engaging with China. We need not antagonize China by explicitly joining hands with countries that China doesn't like. America is at the top of that list, and many groups, many individuals, many political parties had that point of view. Now imagine a situation today who can make that argument today? I mean, I can be very open. Even the communist parties would not make that, would not be able to make that point publicly. So clearly in India, the political discourse, the political complexion of this issue has been changed. And that has been changed not because India did something, but because the Chinese are hell-bent on making themselves a pariah in the Indian political landscape. So what we are witnessing is something which is, again, if Chinese are so smart, are they hurting themselves in the Indian context, where they're losing even the limited friends that they had? So what is the point of of this exercise, or what is the point of engaging with India at all, as far as Beijing is concerned? Because their engagement has been so negative. Now the larger, so therefore, today, when you have, India conducts most number of exercises, military exercises with the US, and there is an acceptance of that reality that we have to do it. Internal capacity building has to be done. Otherwise, how will you manage the behemoth that is standing on the at the northern frontier? And internationally, of course, the environment has changed, the context has changed. Countries that were so reluctant to engage with, perhaps were reluctant to engage with India, and those countries with whom India was reluctant to engage, suddenly have found favors with each other. So the idea of Quad, for example, it was revived 2007 to 2017. A remarkable trajectory. 2007, it was discarded because Australians feared, India feared that why antagonize China, but it did not yield them any dividends. So by 2017, it was taken as as a concrete step. And now that we are talking of inviting Australia into the Malabar exercises, it means that India is shedding that reticence, and in making sure, in making it very explicit, that we will have partners, we will develop defense partnerships, and we will take it to a level where they are credible. So interoperability, for example, in working in real time, learning with each other, learning from each other's structures and processes, is something that is very, very vital if you are to frame a response to China's aggression. And I think that's what these military exercises convey.
Yes, absolutely, Harsh. Like you said, so this was supposed to be a message for China, and it did convey that message, right? Because the naval exercises, the joint naval exercises between US and India, as well as the exercises in the Philippine Sea between US, Japan, and Australia, and as a result, you see all the members of the Quad here active. So these exercises were meant to convey that message to China, and hopefully they were successful.
I think so. I think, see, I mean, the idea of countries, coming together has always bothered China. So again, you may go back to 2007, the kind of hue and cry Chinese raised, that countries are ganging up to contain China, and that the logic of Indo-Pacific, the logic of Quad, both are designed to contain China, and that containment of China is something that is unnecessary, etc., etc. I mean, they really get worked up when they see countries working together in unison. But what is the best possible strategy not to make that happen? The strategy should have been to engage more positively with these countries. But rather than doing positive engagement, China's engagement went in a completely different direction. So clearly, a lot of the blame, if today China looks at its environment, and if it looks at these countries that are engaging at once that were reluctant now are more are shedding that reticence, I think Beijing should recognize that a lot of the fault lies with the way Mr. Xi Jinping, with the way Beijing has handled these issues, and not with the way these countries are reacting, because they are being forced. They gave China a chance, and that China did not take up that chance. The Communist Party decided not to take up that option. They decided to go for confrontation, and so they are getting it in return.
Yeah, confrontation, and probably China realized that its time under the sun has arrived, and this is the moment to seize. Now, as far as India-China relations are concerned and our perceptions of the LAC, there seems to be still a lot of difference between India and China in how we look at the LAC. So while the talks are on, we probably are not going anywhere because there is a wide gap in our perception of the LAC. And India has asked China to deliver sincerely on the commitments which were reached at the military level talks. India has asked China to sincerely implement these understandings reached at the military level talks. So clearly there is still a wide gap.
Absolutely. It looks like, I think, especially on the, Gogra and Pangong, so the questions remain where they were, the issues remain where they were. For example, last month, there has been no significant movement. There has been no attempt to disengage from where the Chinese were. So clearly what we are looking at is a process that is going to be very, very long drawn out. And the basic problem here is how do you trust the Chinese? So I think that element, that now that India is insisting on verification, that India is insisting that we won't be moving our troops back unless we have verifiable reports that Chinese are also doing similar thing, I think tells you a story about this relationship, and that it is very, very fragile, and that Chinese have really done great disservice by just destroying the fabric of this relationship. Now, it may be that Chinese don't want to have a working relationship with Indians, and I think that is a possibility that we will now have to accept, and we should be willing to live with it, because otherwise there is no rational explanation for why China would engage in something like this. And therefore, for India, there is no other option but to dig in its heels, but to make sure that the Indian military reinforcement remains there, but to make sure that and continue to make this case to the Chinese, as you were mentioning in the statement which ME has released, that we want verified commitment, we want verified movement from the Chinese side. Status quo ante should be restored. If that does not happen, then the relationship really, really is in big trouble. And that's a message that India needs to send out. It is sending out. But I see, but the issue here is that I don't see Chinese very willing to accommodate Indian interests. And so the challenge for India would be that we are looking at a long-term future with China as an adversary that is hell-bent on destroying Indian stakes and Indian interests, not only along the boundary, but around the world. And so we have to be prepared for that.
Absolutely. That's a very important point that you're making there, that probably there is, the Chinese do not seem to be willing to accommodate India. And so we are looking at a long-term adversary, and there is a growing disdain too. Thank you so much, Harsh, for this discussion on this episode of the Ideas Factory.